Welcome to Momentum Investing, property investing made easy. One of the world's top podcasts on property investing, bringing you the top experts in the field so you can learn firsthand what it takes to create passive income and take control over your financial future.
Welcome to the Momentum Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wood, and I'm very excited to invite you to this episode. This episode was one that was very exciting for me because I had the honor of interviewing Judy Robinett. Judy has, for the past decades, been working on raising funds for startups, for investors, for investments, for venture capital. She's done everything in the world of raising finance, and we know that is one of the requests that you as a listener have of the Momentum Investing Podcast. How do I raise more money to do more deals and become more successful? Well, this episode delivers exactly that. Judy shares how she's been able to build a global network where she meets people from all over the world and connects them to raise finance on a massive scale. She'll show you how she started out, how she started building her network, and how you can do the same, and maybe one day join in just like her at raising hundreds of millions of dollars for property and business investments. So if you want to jet fuel, if you want to catapult your property journey forward, this episode is going to be very, very exciting. All right, welcome. I'm super excited to be here with Judy Robinett. Super excited to have you.
Thank you.
So yes, we want to talk to you about funding. Obviously, you've been working with large companies and people all over the world with funding and have been successful at it. And that's something we're all obviously interested in, how we can get more money to our businesses, to our deals, to our property. So we'd be really excited to hear kind of some of the fundamentals and things you see are important when going out and raising finance.
Well, the first thing I tell people is there's no lack of money. So Credit Suisse has a global wealth report annually, and global wealth is at 368 trillion. So there truly is no lack of money out there. The secret is it's people that have that. So it is key that you build relationships, and specifically the right kind of relationships. And then probably the third point is you have to get to the right funders, because what we're seeing now, and I don't know whether this would fit with real estate, but it probably does. We see that the sovereign wealth funds are now doing direct deals all the way down through syndicating with family offices and angel groups down to super angels. And family offices are typically an individual who's had a very successful exit and, has a couple of $100 million kicking around, looking to make a solid ROI on that. And so they usually have 2 or 3 people that run those offices looking for deals. Now, they're not regulated like, the VCs and other groups. And so, there's not a lot of information out there about them, but there's over 6,000 of them, particularly in the UK and in the United States is the biggest. And Crunchbase had an article last March that said they're now seeing 2 times the deals that venture capitalists are. Wow. I, a couple of years ago, gave a speech to 600 real estate fund managers. And, they confirmed that they're getting money from family offices and super angels, who are individuals that, didn't necessarily start a family office, but they're wealthy with very deep pockets and love to play. So those are kind of the big picture. Realize there's no lack of money out there and that it all revolves around relationships. And then you have to be strategic and find the right investors for yourself. I always tell people what I teach, the 3 golden questions. And, the first one is, how can I help you? You always try to be generous and create reciprocity and do good. And then the second one is, after you've shared your story, maybe about your project, you say, what other ideas do you have for me? So one of the secrets in fundraising is you never ask for money. You always ask for advice. And then the third question is, who else do you know I should talk to? So people normally know 800 to 1,000 people. And that question will literally allow you to like crowdsource through 1,000 people to find maybe just 3 people. So if you do those questions, then you're more likely to find investors who are specifically interested in your project. And then it's time to just really show them a great story. And mainly they're going to be investing as you as a person. And so it's important that you build the relationship. I always tell people, realize on that first meeting, you want to get the second date. Don't, overwhelm them. Don't, immediately say, don't you want to put 8 million in my multi-office complex?
Yeah.
So that's a few of the overview fundamentals.
Right. No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I think that works on, obviously you're playing at a very high level. So I'm not sure everyone kept up with the terminology. So I'm going to quickly go through some of that terminology. But, so you talked about how like the sovereign wealth funds are putting money into all kinds of deals. So that would be obviously sovereign wealth, the different countries.
Yes, the different countries, and they manage over 10 trillion now. And that's 8% of the global GDP. So it's a huge amount of money
actually go into deals.
Yeah.
And as you say, that goes to family offices and super angels, which are essentially individuals with hundreds of millions of dollars, really hundreds of millions of any currency. And that is then, again, they want to get an ROI, they put that into deals. But I love how you then take it down into because what you said obviously applies to that level, but it also applies for someone starting out looking for their first deal. Those 3 questions are brilliant. What can I do for you? What, can you give me advice? And who do you know that I should talk to?
Yeah. I mean, and you realize you'll be out of your comfort zone. I do pitch deck reviews and actually I'm a judge on pitch decks or pitch events all around the world. I've done them. And, the entrepreneurs will talk to me ahead of time and say, I'm really afraid and I don't want to admit I'm broke. And you have to realize your problem is somebody else's solution. So here's a person sitting on gobs of cash, trying to figure out how they're going to get a return. Yeah. So your problem is really their solution. And so you come from an attitude of, this is a good opportunity for you. I've got something that can be very helpful to you.
Yeah, exactly. That's a brilliant way of looking at it because, we try to talk to, friends and family are, they're obviously not playing at that level, but they will have, your average Joe's version of lots of money. They'll have, maybe hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands just sitting there in a bank account, kind of useless. And here you are, you have a deal and that can match up. And I love how you use, because I think that's been your real strength, right? Is the fact that the third question, right? Where you go, who else do you think I should talk to? And how that just becomes like a ripple effect, because obviously you ask that same question of those people, and then that leads to more, and then that continues to grow.
Yeah, it's exponential. And I'm sitting in a town of 1,000 people in Franklin, Idaho. If you ever saw the movie Napoleon Dynamite, I went to that high school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And,
I actually didn't see that movie.
So, I was like a nobody, didn't do so well in high school. And, when I got in the corporate world, and I was really shy. And I looked around, I couldn't figure out, why these people were getting promotions and things were happening. And I finally figured out it's who you know. It's the power of the influence and really who you know. And so I read, how to make friends, how to influence people, make friends, and started saying hello to people. And, it was a real shock to me, but people actually liked me. I used to think, why would anybody want to talk to me?
Right.
And, I've been on panels with Mark Cuban. I've, been to royal palaces. I've, been on Marie Bartolomeo on Fox TV. I almost passed out when the producer took me to the live TV stage.
I can imagine.
if I look back on what has happened, it is because I add value. I try to be generous. and help people. And you can do that very easily, offer a book recommendation, send them a report, make an introduction, invite them to a private event. And that led me higher and higher and higher to the point that, I now sit on venture capital boards, written 2 books. I'd never in my life dreamed I'd be where I am. And I finally distilled all that. I mean, here I am, I'm going to be 68. And decided I was going to teach people that were younger so they didn't have to get the bricks to the head like I did.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we do this we do in Momentum. And we got ripped off for literally hundreds of thousands of pounds when we just started out, and it almost bankrupted us. And we were able to turn it around thanks to amazing people who came in and helped us out. And I just got just this week, I got 2 investors who called me because they were getting ripped off. One had been ripped off for 200,000 pounds. And luckily, we can now step in and kind of try to help them and help that situation. And I think that's so important. Those like yourself who've gone through this, who've kind of worked out how the system works, to kind of share it so so the rest of us don't have to figure out how to build a wheel.
Yeah. And the truth is most people are good. There's about 5% that are the dark triad, and that's the narcissistic, Machiavellian, sociopaths.
Right.
And you want to avoid those people. So, even with an investor that says they're willing, I would suggest you do your own due diligence and make sure they're not litigious. They don't try to create conflict and then take you to court. And so there are some bad players out there, but the majority of people are good people. And if you ask for help, they will help you. Yeah. And a lot of them you have to ping, like, who else do you know? Because you'll see them literally like turn their head and go, oh, you need to talk to George.
Right.
And so it really does work.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And one thing I loved is what you said, you kind of start by giving value, right? So I think everyone understands the concept, but the question becomes the kind of the how, like kind of like you when you were younger, when you're like, well, why would anyone want to be friends with me? What kind of value do I bring? I think a lot of people starting out have that question. So what would you say? How do I bring value to someone?
Well, the very most interesting thing is so high level emotional IQ, probably the core skill is your ability to listen. And I tell people to learn to listen with their eyes, their ears, and their heart. I mean, really learn how to listen and pay attention, because most of us just want a connection. I mean, we want to feel engaged with somebody that's authentic. And so, and you'd be surprised how many people will, say to me, I really appreciated your ear and you hearing me out. So starting with that, I mean, you have
really
value.
Took Dale Carnegie's lessons to heart, didn't you? That's
that's
straight up how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah, but they've done more and more research, and they coined the term emotional IQ, and at that core is that you learn to listen. Probably the second thing is you do add value and keep your promises. So as soon as I meet someone, I will typically invite them to LinkedIn within that day, and I will have found out enough about them, like their hobby, their family, their pets, that I'll be able to write back a kind, genuine email thanking them for the opportunity to meet with them. And I'll just tell you, when I did my first book, How to Be a Power Connector, the publishing house said to me, Judy, you have to build a platform. Well, I didn't even know what a platform was.
Right.
And it took me the longest time to get somebody to interview me. And I was so thrilled. I made a batch of homemade fudge and sent to this woman.
Oh,
and
wow.
She called me on the phone and she said, most people don't even say thank you, alone do something like this.
Wow.
And oh, by the way, I know about 10 other podcasters that would love to have you as a guest.
Wow.
And then I found out, I should ask that question. Who else do you know? What other podcasters? And so it's true across all verticals.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I can imagine, that stands out, sending you out over some homemade fudge.
And a matter of fact, one of my friends, John Ruhlin, wrote a book called Giftology.
Right.
And he's an expert, and I can have him be on your show if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's really an expert. He's built and sold, I think, 5 companies and figured out so much about just giving a personalized gift, what that is. But honestly, what I do is I curate some information through like McKinsey or Harvard Business Review or other ones, and then I will watch for an article or something that would be of interest to that person and send it and say,
Oh,
hi, how
wow.
you doing? Here's this article. I'm a voracious reader. So send me, books that you like,
But
or
do you keep
I
all this
recommend.
in your mind, or do you have like a CRM system to keep an eye on, like, this is what Daniel would enjoy? I mean, how do you do it?
I do have a really good memory. And what happens is you usually only meet, maybe a couple of people a week. So you kind of have them top of mind.
Right.
But I do follow the principles in my first book. I found out that groups fall apart at 150. It's called Dunford's Law.
Yeah,
Even the
yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
and research that was published in Harvard Business Review looking at the top 100 wealth managers that make on average $1 million plus annually and have for 10 years. They went and looked at the relationships. They had 4 key relationships.
Right.
And so you want to think about who is that core group that will have your back and have your future.
Right.
And, I often think of Oprah's quote, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You really, want people who will help you. If they're not going to help you, you don't want them in your network.
No,
So
that makes
are they,
perfect sense.
are you comfortable with them? Are they a caring human being?
Oh, I love that. I love that. So just to kind of boil this down for people is essentially talk to the people you know, ask them the 3 questions, what can I do for you? Who, ask for advice, and then who else do you know that I should be talking to? And then be just a normal, polite person, or maybe an unnormal, polite person, and say thank you, and maybe a personalized gift on that.
Yeah. And then another thing is reach out to barristers, lawyers, we call it over here, who are specific in your field, in real estate or whatever business you're in. I love Wilson Sonsini. Daniel Glazer is in London. He does many transatlantic deals. Great guy. And many of these law firms will take a meeting with you. And you can tell them, what you're up to. And it's also really important who you have as a lawyer. I mean, any barrister can write a contract, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you want ones that are well connected in your industry. It will help with exits, finding investors, finding, both sides of that equation. Bankers, know people. The accountants, people who do the books, and you'll be surprised. So I've had people call me up and go, Judy, I asked my dentist or my doctor and
Yeah.
they invested.
Yeah.
And so, and just so you know, it's like 80% of current business owners are looking for deals. And so, kind of the regular Joe person, even if they might have 100,000 in their bank account, may be schemish. But somebody who's already been a risk taker and is open to business that's successful, go to those people.
Right. Yeah, because they've already been through the mill themselves. They kind of know, it's a challenge, but they also know it can work.
Yeah. And you tell your story, and it's like the universe opens up and it rains some goodness and some gold on you. It really is true.
Oh, I love that.
I've raised, millions and millions upon dollars, and it often comes from the least suspected place. And so, people will say to me, well, I was really targeted. I got this person and this person and this person, and that works to a point. But then if you allow for serendipity, chance, it is just amazing to me what can happen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. An early investor in our journey was an old schoolmate of mine who'd never been financially savvy, nothing like that. But one day we were at the gym together, and I was talking about the investments we were doing, and it turned out he had a couple I think it was $20,000-$30,000 in his bank account. And, I could never imagine him having that kind of money. And we ended up doing a deal. So it comes from the most unlikely sources. Some people will save more than you ever believe.
Yeah, just in the United States, there's 44,000 millionaires.
Wow.
44,000 millionaires. There is a new billionaire minted every minute. So Goldman Sachs added new wealth managers because they said, there's so much wealth, and don't let the pandemic get you down. I mean, we now have exceeded deal limits that were, before the pandemic. We're above those. And most of the Fortune 50 companies were started during a recession. So really the number one secret is to be persistent. And I just want to share a couple of quick stories with you on serendipity. And by the way, I just got a message saying my call was changed. But, I had a friend and I had helped her. She was at a big law firm in Washington, D.C. And she called me one day and she said, Judy, you've been so helpful to me. I want to take you on an all-expense 10-day trip to Serbia to meet with government officials around the state, meet with some entrepreneurs. And, I said, well, that's really interesting. And I got off the phone going, why would I want to go to Serbia? And then I thought, and one of my close friends said to me, Judy, you ought to go. There's always something good that will come out of it. Well, I know Kevin Harrington, who was on one of the sharks on Shark Tank.
Yep.
And I told him I was going. So I always try to tell people not only the story, but where I'm at. Like, hi, Kevin, I'm going to Belgrade. And he goes, oh, you are? I want you to meet this entrepreneur and tell me if he has a good business model and if about his character. Vet his character.
Cool. Yeah,
So
I met him, Kevin Harrington, a few years ago. I liked him. He's a unique guy.
Yeah. So this is how I met my business partner, Ivan, in Serbia. I was so impressed. I brought his company to the United States, and I now own a piece of that company. And then I gave a speech at the World Economic Forum in Kiev, and met a gentleman who called me last week and said, and he runs a multifamily office that oversees wealth in Brazil, Mexico, the US, London, Switzerland, France, and I probably left out a few. And he said, and I'd gone out of my way just sending him articles like economic reports and such that I knew would be of interest to him, and asked how his family was doing. He called me last week and said, Judy, I'd like to invite you to be on the board of a digital banking company. Our family office is in it. We're syndicating with the Silicon Valley VC. And I go look at the other board members. One of them was a prior CEO of Microsoft. And I'm like pinching myself going, and there's two examples of things you could have never planned for that lead to, higher levels. And so really the key is being persistent and giving, being generous.
Yeah.
Giving
too many times and it comes back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. That is so cool. That is so cool. I know we sadly got to let you go, but I know everyone wants to learn more from you. So is there any way someone, if they're listening, can connect, can learn from you? How do we? Yeah,
write to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to get back to people. And my email is judy@judyrobinett.com with no E on the end.
Right.
Love the UK.
Link your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can easily find it and connect with you.
Yeah, and I'll share a couple of documents if you want to put in the show notes that can help people with funding. And I'll also have got kind of a top 10 list of connecting and how to connect with people.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, if you can share that, we'll definitely add it to the show notes and everyone will be able to download them from a click. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Judy.
Thank you, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. I got a couple surprises for you in a moment. Thank you so much, Judy. I'll speak to you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Judy is amazing, isn't she? She has done so much and really shows us in this episode how we can raise finance. Now, in our upcoming episode, this is one you really want to listen to, because in the last few episodes, we've really focused on the whole point of how to find investors, how to raise finance. Well, in this episode, we're going to take a different tack, and we're going to look at the company structures that you need to have in place in order to raise finance, how to do it legally, and how to have those structures. How do you pay the taxes? How does your investor pay taxes? How do you structure your business in the best possible way? Well, who better to ask than my own accountant, Jeffrey Bohr, to join us on the show and show us exactly how we can do to have this success. Now, I hope you're already subscribed to the Momentum Investing Podcast, but if you're not, please hit the subscribe button, because this episode is one you don't want to miss. You'll see in the episode how I learned straight up from Jeffrey during the episode how I could reorganize my business. So it was a very, very powerful exercise. It was a very powerful episode. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with you on Tuesday next week. And make sure you subscribe, because it is going to be powerful. If you haven't yet started your property journey, you feel these episodes are a little too high level, that's okay. I completely understand. And that's why we've created an Introduction to Property Investing course. You go to www.momentumgift.com. You can start at the beginning and get the knowledge, the 3 simple steps of property investing, and the 3 most common mistakes new investors make and how to avoid them. We've created that specifically for you starting out your journey. So make sure you just join there, keep learning, keep growing. For you who has already started your journey, who is on this journey, well, click the subscribe button so you get these weekly updates with some of the top experts in the field. I'll see you next week.